exhausted. Just went for a 3k run up to the lighthouse, and then went into the surf and did some body surfing, if you could call it that. Wow, I was just pushing past my limits. I could really notice when I went past those limits. They came up, they were really obvious. Mind was chattering. Mind was going, we've got to stop. This hurts, that hurts. Remember how old you are now. Not as young as you used to be. All those things come to mind. And there's the threshold, there's the edge of the mind, there's the edge of the personality. And in those moments you have to ask yourself, who's saying that? Who's actually saying that? Because as soon as you do, you say, oh, I'm saying that. But then who's listening? There's always something behind the personality that's observing everything. It seems totally calm and chilled out and can handle it, no problem. And so you see where the limits of the mind are, you see where the limits of the body are. And when I can and I notice it, I'll lean in and I'll just stay there and I'll stay with it. And if I can, I'll lean in just a little bit more. I won't go nuts like pushing it. This ain't CrossFit, but I will just see if I can stay on that edge, play with that edge, in and out of the edge. Now what's interesting is that I've been doing lots of different types of meditations for a long time now, and I know when I'm at the edge of my mind, I can feel it. It's a very distinct feeling. And if you can just go past it, just that, you don't have to blow past it, you just have to creep by, then you go beyond the threshold of your self, your old self, and you step into a new space, new mind, new body, new place, new time. And then there's this sort of like void feeling. It's like floating in space. I'm not actually sure where I am or what's going on exactly or what's going to happen next. So, this unfamiliar territory, typically speaking, unless you're having a blissful experience and you're just like loving life and you're floating in that beautiful unknown space. Often unfamiliarity is commonly linked with and associated with fear, okay? But it's not necessarily something to be afraid of. It's just something you're not used to.
Take the exit towards Bruxelles Highway B60.
And so, we're always on the lookout for the edge of the program, the unconscious program, because they do often, ride underneath the surface, and they're outside your awareness, and often it takes someone from the outside to observe it for you, so you can catch it and you can see what's actually going on. Because when we talk about unconscious programs, it's exactly what they are. They're unconscious. You don't know that that program is running you, it's operating you. It's actually making up you, right? It's a foundation of your personality. And when you really want to make those changes and make those breakthroughs, you have to get outside of yourself, or as it's been commonly referred to as going beyond yourself. So how do you do that? Like, it's not something you can really, you can't fake it, you have to actually do it. And physical exercises is an obvious one where you can push beyond your boundaries. Obviously you don't want to burn your body out. freak yourself out, put yourself into so much unfamiliar territory that it scares you so much that you negatively anchor yourself. We want to avoid that. But we want to get to that edge and make that edge a bit more familiar.
Meters at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Bronxner Highway B60.
And so we can expand that comfort zone, expand that edge further out. Because like Dan Winter would say, you want to expand your aura, your energy field. You want to get it as big as you can. And and so to do that, you have to expand it bigger than it is, right? You have to expand your mind bigger than it is. You have to experience yourself bigger than you were. And
The roundabout onto Bronxner Highway.
sometimes it's not about being
B60 for 19 kilometers.
it's not about being more enthusiastic or being happier or convincing yourself that you're more than what you are. It's actually, you have to just go beyond, just stretch that little bit extra. And when you can catch that unconscious programming operating at full tilt, and you can catch it, and observe it, then, oh man, you've got a really clear picture of what that unconscious program is. And then you can start to really get to work when you come back and settle in and decompress, equalize, reconfigure. You may have a few aches and pains. You may have a bit of disorientation or discomfort. You may just be blissed out and, want to just ride that wave. They're the best ones when that happens. When that happens, you don't really need any help or support. If anything, if you've been up there too long, maybe someone needs to pull you down to the ground nice and gently and reattach you to the ground. But often, let's just stay out there as long as you can. But typically, this can be, most people who are new to this, they have this feeling of disorientation and they think something's wrong. They go, oh, something's wrong because I was feeling bliss before the last time I was in a group meditation and it was just beautiful, or I had a great meditation the other night and it was amazing and I had this great experience, or I had an aha moment, or I had so many synchronicities, or I manifested my object, something, the divine turned up and surprised me and it was beautiful. And these are all beautiful rewards and prizes along the way. These are things we want to set the stage, set the set and setting, and prepare the space and ourselves to have that happen more often, or as often as it can. But typically, when you get stretched beyond your comfort zone, beyond yourself, it's a bit like physical training. You're going to have little tears and strains and sprains maybe, or you're just going to be a little bit achy. And it's going to take a few days to recover. I was speaking to another practitioner, someone who's quite dedicated to his practice, and he was saying that he was doing a healing session with his daughter, and he's a very open channel for that high vibrational energy to come through, and it comes through, it sort of takes over the body and it starts channeling straight through, and the current's quite strong, and he slips into these altered states of consciousness where magic happens, and then once it's done, it switches off, and then his body will just pulse and vibrate, and it'll be fluxing and changing for a good 2-3 days. And he'll be wiped out, he'll be tired, and maybe he needs a bit of grounding and all that sort of stuff. And he keeps saying to me, what's going on with this vibration, what's happening to me? And it's like, man, when you open yourself up and that higher vibration, higher amplitude, frequency, current comes through, it takes over your body and it forces the body to upgrade and update, So it's a bit like, if we put it into nuts and bolts, it's like a race car, when you put a higher octane mix of fuel in, the engine's going to respond in a different way to if you just put typical, ethanol unleaded in there. And so when that happens in a car, there are extra stresses put on the parts in the car. And so it's, I remember when I was young and I wanted to do up my car, which was a little bomb. I wanted to upgrade the engine and put a turbo on there and, get new suspension and, make it faster and handle better. And that was going to cost a fortune, more than the car was worth. And then someone said, oh yeah, but you can't just upgrade the engine and the suspension. You have to upgrade the brakes. You have to upgrade the seat belts and the safety measures. A lot of the bodywork or the chassis has to be re-engineered to withstand impacts at higher speed. And basically, the car's not designed for that. So it's probably just better upgrading and getting a new car. But the human body and the human mind is different. It's not a mechanical machine, it's a bioenergetic system, a bioenergetic machine, if you want to call it a machine. And it can upgrade itself, it can repair itself, rebuild itself, redesign itself. And so when it's put under different types of stressors, there's part of the brain that records the experience, like a Formula One crew is connected to the car, and the car sends data back to the crew. Every lap it does, every gear it does, every change that happens, and they build up data the whole year round, and they do all this testing. And they do slow laps, and they do hot laps, and they do, wet weather laps and dry laps, and slick tires and wet tires, and this suspension setup and that engine setting, and this steering and this, all dry weather, wet weather, all that sort of stuff, all those variations, all that goes into the database, and then the engineers review the data and they adjust the car accordingly and brief the driver, the pilot, on the changes on how they need to drive the car. And so there's a lot that goes into this when we're talking about racing, but when we're talking about the human body and the human mind, a lot of this is all unconscious. It just does it, right? It just does it, and you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning and you may be sore for a couple of days, or you may be a little bit disorientated for a few days, and then by the 3rd, 4th or 5th day, typically, if you haven't gone too hard and push yourself way out of your comfort zone so far that you can't ground yourself again and get back into your body properly, but if you can and you do it sensibly, then on the 4th or 5th day or 6th day or 7th day, it's all going to be done for you. You're just going to wake up and that body's going to be adjusted to that experience. So if you ever put it through that same stress again, the body will have adapted to it to be able to take that on better. And if you repeat that process without changing the intensity or the depth or the time frame, if you just repeat the same training over and over again, the body will keep changing and become even more and more efficient at it. And then, you know, you come to an equilibrium where you can just do that activity easily and effortlessly. And then it's about, you know, do you want to add more stress to upgrade the body further, or are you happy with that and you want to work on something else? So, you know, these are things to consider when you start looking at your approach to your training. So just food for thought. I thought I'd put that down while I'm, you know, in a bit of a weary state. You can actually see what's kind of state I'm in right now. It's not all happy-go-lucky, and, you know, spirituality is not pretending you're in a good mood all the time and that everything's wonderful. I think there's a lot more to it than that, and I think a lot of it focuses on, you know, training and disciplining yourself and working on and with yourself and learning, you know, the thresholds, the limitations, and I think, well, I know from my experience at least, that you can go a lot further over time through training than you ever thought was possible. And I don't believe we've really, at least in the mainstream, we haven't really seen what the mind and the body is capable of yet. And we definitely haven't seen, well, not at least not in this day and age. We've heard stories about people that who have been able to prepare the mind and the body so much so that that energy, that spirit, that consciousness can come through unhindered and uninhibited and work its magic through the human mind and body. And so this is where I've been wanting to take training for a long time, is how do you embody that God consciousness in a human form? And I'm not talking religious here, I'm talking when you've had a taste of that energy coming into your brain and body, and you survive it. Because it's a huge current, and I related it to, you know, big wave surfing, you know, the kind that Laird Hamilton does, you know, where you're towed onto a monster wave by a jet ski, you know, and you need to tweak the equipment. You can't just go there in a standard vehicle. Your vehicle needs to be prepared to a large degree to be able to connect with it, and that's the thing. It's such a loving intelligence that it will push you and it will stretch you, but it will never break you, even though it could quite easily wipe you out completely, but it just doesn't. And so it will never push you past the point that you're capable of. Having said that, though, I know some of you have had some pretty out there experiences where you've been stretched really, really hard, and those remember those moments, even though you can't consciously with your personality perceive how, you know, you'd say, oh, that's a bit too far, I didn't expect it to go that far, but that intelligence collecting all that data all the time underneath the surface, knows where your thresholds are. And if you're being lazy, it's going to just stretch you and take you there and show you, hey, this is actually where you should be training at, you know. Or if you're being ridiculous and you're pushing too hard
meters,
and
turn
being
left onto Ballina Road.
and being irresponsible, then it will slow you down.